this is not just an issue between truckers and brokers. This is an issue of basic transparency, fairness, and efficiency in the whole system.
Welcome back to the show. We've been telling you in recent weeks about the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's efforts to bring about more transparency and more fairness to the brokerage industry. OOIDA has been on the front lines of this fight for quite some time now, and the association is still there. They're holding a fireside chat next week to get truckers engaged. We'll talk about that now, among other things, with OOIDA President Todd Spencer and OOIDA Executive Vice President Lewie Pugh. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Glad to.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you here. I want to talk about the fireside chat on January 8th. I want to talk about OOIDA's call to action on the broker transparency proposal. But first, I want to hear from both of you about the rulemaking itself. We haven't talked to you specifically about it. There are 4 specific provisions in it for those who have been busy working, perhaps busy spending time with family over the holidays. Can you kind of explain for us what this rulemaking in particular would do to address the problems that people are encountering out there?
Well, I'd have to say the core issue with the issue between truckers and brokers is transparency. I mean, the details of the entire arrangement. Now, this isn't complex stuff. It isn't new stuff. We're not asking for new regulations. The regulations for transparency have been on the books since 1980. 80!
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah.
However, they're not being enforced, right?
Well, look, brokers have simply not complied. They've simply blown off the rule. They've blown off the requirements for all of these years. And no matter complaints, they've found ways to become not in greater compliance, but even less compliance, and to find clever ways to try to evade any legitimate efforts for compliance. And, enough is enough. All of these issues came to a head 4 years ago because of COVID and because of COVID's impact on what was going on with trucking and with truckers. And, we watched truckers go to D.C., out in front of the White House. And the issue that they were there focused specifically on was the lack of transparency in the relationships that they had between carriers and brokers. And it's, look, over 4 decades, it's time for some compliance. And this is our effort to, in essence, elevate the issue and get the agency to take some real steps to remedy this issue. Again, asking for transparency is not asking for a lot. I mean, it's just we're talking about honesty, candor, relationships. And, it's not like brokers don't have a role in transportation. They do, an important role. But this is an effort to separate the good from the bad, and a legitimate effort.
Yeah. And it's not complex stuff, like you said there. A couple of the provisions are making sure that brokers keep an electronic record of these transactions and making them available to a carrier, I think, within 48 hours if a carrier requests it. Lewie, as you look at this, and as Todd kind of pointed out here, these regulations have been there. Compliance has not been. Enforcement has not been as well. How far would this particular transparency proposal go toward fixing? It's not going to fix all the problems, we know that, but how far would it go toward fixing some of the problems that we're seeing out there?
Well, it'd go a lot farther than we went before because we haven't been doing anything.
Yeah.
I mean, some of that, of course, remains to be seen. I think, the one thing that's lacking there, and this is why it's real important for truckers to file comments, is how this is going to be enforced, what's going to happen. It'd be nice to have some of that in there. The one thing we were hoping to get in there was that they had to produce this just automatically. You'll still have to request it. And so we're a little disappointed it wasn't that. And the reason we wanted it to just automatic is because what we hear from our members and carriers is they're afraid to ask for this information because they're afraid they'll get blacklisted. And so, and we understand that. But the there comes a time you got to stand up for what's right, and this may be the time if we get this across the finish line. And the other thing that's a little concerning, it didn't really address, the one big issue you see out here is that brokers are requiring motor carriers to waive their right to 371.3 in their broker carrier agreements. Now, we do not believe that any business entity has the right to ask another business entity to waive the right to any kind of federal regulation. And that really wasn't addressed either. So that's another thing that needs to be put in comments. And you know what I'd like to say here, because we get feedback both pro and con. And I think we all know what the pros are, but the cons that we hear from members is it's their business, it's their thing, why we want this, why are we wanting new legislations. As Todd said, this is not a new rule. This is a rule that's been out there. It's been there for the 80s, so we're not asking for anything new. As a trucker, you have a right to know these things. And I think what happens is with some members and some truckers, fortunately, they've not had a problem. Where this really gets into play, and we see this weekly here, is carrier hauls a load, delivers a load, they get a signed bill of lading, everything's clean, good, happy, and they leave. And then a month or so goes by and they get a bill from the broker saying that there was a claim on this load. Carrier wants to know what the claim is, and the broker tells them, well, we don't have to tell you, you just owe us $1,500. And you've waived your right of knowing what all the problems are and all this stuff. Yeah. And that's when stuff like this really becomes an issue, and you have nothing to prove or nothing to show. And unfortunately, you get stuck because what these brokers also put in their contract is they can do cross-collateralization and stuff like that, so they can hold your money from other loads and stuff like that. So it becomes a real sticky mess for the carrier. So even if you haven't had a problem, and hopefully you never have a problem, this is a way to help give you some added protection. And then, of course, the whole electronic thing comes down to is you're a motor carrier, you pick up a load in Pennsylvania, you live in Ohio, you deliver it to Florida, but the broker's in California, and he's like, well, we'll show you, but you have to come out to our office. Well, that isn't feasible.
Super easy.
Yeah. So that's not feasible.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that. And they know it.
Yeah.
And come on. We do everything electronically now. They sign broker carrier agreements and stuff all the time electronically. So there's no reason we can't do this electronically as well.
This may all have been around since the 80s. We're not in the 1980s anymore. Obviously, there are ways to communicate that weren't available in the 1980s. Just in general, Todd.
Well, wait a minute. Let me point something else too. This isn't just about truckers and brokers. This is all parties to the transaction, and that includes shippers, receivers, and anyone else that may have been involved. And the idea behind transparency is that without transparency, you can't really resolve problem issues. You can't fairly resolve claims issues for any particular reason. If there's any kind of a problem that shows up, this is something that just totally subverts any kind of meaningful and fair resolution. So again, this is a rule that was on the books for a good reason at the time, and that reason hasn't changed.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed. I mean, without having access to accurate information, you'll never fairly resolve anything. And, that comes up in all areas of business.
Yeah. Let's talk about this fireside chat a little bit because it's taking place on Wednesday, January 8th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. I know that OOIDA has done some of these kinds of things before. I think it's been a while, though. I'm curious why. So what's the idea behind this fireside chat? What are you hoping to do, obviously, in the context of this broker transparency proposal? What are you looking to accomplish here?
I think first and foremost, we want to educate members. This is kind of we've done a couple of these things in the past. We're going to try to do more of this. Also, it gives us an opportunity to hear back from members. Todd's going to speak. I'll speak. Jay Grimes, our head of regulatory affairs out in D.C., is going to be a part of this fireside chat, kind of give people the information, the whys, the reason, the history, all that stuff, how to give comments. And then also there'll be time that people can send questions in if you have a question or information or something like that you want to add as well. Because, we put a lot of information out there, which is good, and that's what we want to do to keep our members and truckers informed. But sometimes we don't get as much information back, and we want to hear what if you don't understand something or have a question, we want to hear those things.
Yeah, for sure.
And obviously, we also want to encourage truckers to engage on the issue, to communicate, to share their thoughts with FMCSA. And, with our fightingfortruckers.com website, we make it really, really, really easy to have access to all of the relevant information and to communicate directly with FMCSA. Now, we don't have in essence a sample letter per se, simply because we want truckers to say how this issue affects them, and in their own words, that is most compelling. And comments don't have to be long. They don't have to be in depth. They can be specific. And the more specific, the better. The issues that you encounter in instances where you ask for this transparency. What happens? What do the brokers do? What are the threats that they make? Let's talk about the real issues that affect real truckers every day. That's how we resolve some of these things.
Yeah, I think at last check there were a couple thousand comments on this already, which is a good number, but I always think back to the speed limiter proposal when there were, I think, 15,000 comments, which I really do think had a role in kind of pushing that thing off and down the line.
Sure.
And
100%.
it can have the opposite effect, I guess, with this, in that if enough people speak up and tell FMCSA what a problem this is, it may spur them to act faster. That's kind of the idea here as well, right, Lewie?
100%. I mean, if you want, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease in Washington, D.C. And that's the one thing I want to say, because I have been on a couple other shows talking about this and stuff, and people have called in or messaged in and said, well, it doesn't matter anyway, because they never listen to truckers. They're going to listen to the brokers over us. Let me remind you, we wouldn't be where we are right now with the opportunity to make comments if they listened to the brokers, because the brokers don't want comments. They didn't want anything. They could have very easily come out and FMCSA and said, we're not doing anything with this petition, and it just went away. So they have made a proposed rulemaking. So now's your chance to give your side of the story. As Todd said, tell how this could affect you, how maybe problems you've had in the past. And if you don't have anything, if nothing else, just get on there. You can get on there as easily and say, hey, I support this, or I support this, but I'd like to see this or this added. The things we talked about earlier. So it's very easy. Fightingfortruckers.com. You can go on there and comment in just a couple minutes, and you can do it from your cell phone. It's very cell phone friendly as well. And yeah, we need 15, 20, 30, 50,000 comments would be fabulous. I mean, there's way more truckers out there than there are brokers. So keep that in mind. This is your opportunity to be heard.
Yeah. Hey, and actually, the brokers have actually weighed in on this topic. They petitioned the agency to do away with this rule completely. And the agency said, nah.
Which should tell you something, right? If
Right.
they're fighting
absolutely.
this.
Well, again, this is not just an issue between truckers and brokers. This is an issue of basic transparency, fairness, and efficiency in the whole system.
Right.
No matter, from time to time, things will come up with any kind of a shipment. And if we're going to have the best transportation system we have an efficient way and a fair way to deal with problems when they pop up. And, hey, let's go on.
Yeah. We should mention that the deadline to submit those comments is January 21st. And I think you've both laid out, what commenting looks like and why it's important. But if anybody has any questions or concerns or whatever, that fireside chat on January 8th on Wednesday would be a good opportunity to do that. And that's what you're looking for, right?
Yep, and you can catch it live on Wednesday evening. As you said with the times, it's 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. Also, if you do miss it, we will be rebroadcasting. There'll be places you'll be able to catch it on social later. Or if you have questions and no other way, call in here to OOIDA, reach out, and we're more than happy to chat with you.
Yeah, 816-229-5791 is the phone number there. Landlinenow.com. We're going to have links to how to comment, information about the fireside chat, and everything else there that can help you. Fightingfortruckers.com as well. It's a great resource for doing that as well. Lewie, Todd, always a pleasure. We appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.